Occurred, the 30th of June 1969, 18 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: disk. Duration: 20 minutes. No of observers. 10 reported. The 21st of December 2006, 22 hours 35 minutes and 8 seconds Pacific. Posted. The 1st of February 2007, 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Characteristics: emitted other objects, large silver sphere, saucer-shaped object that hovered for several minutes. Emitted dots, in data style format, from side. I have never reported this, but if I could find some of my old neighbors, I'm sure someone else could confirm this, as many of us saw it. It began very high in the sky as a bright light, apparently the setting sun reflecting from it. Many of us were outside because it was warm weather, didn't get dark until late. Us kids playing back in the days when you had 3 channels on TV and all doors and windows open because no one had air conditioning. The object descended very slowly, but was in a straight down descent. No shaking or moving otherwise. It eventually settled right over our street, Phillips Drive, and was huge. It sat there for several minutes. Strange how there were no airplanes going to Weir Cook Airport during the duration of this sighting. Usually, we could expect a jet to fly over every 3 to 10 minutes. They would get low enough to rattle the windows because we were very close to the airport. Many adults and children stood in their yards watching as word spread quickly. This craft was directly over my front yard. It was silver in color. At one point, I distinctly saw what looked like 6 dots. We didn't have computers then, but now I know it looked like computer data, emitted from the left side of the vessel. They were in perfect order. After the dots were emitted, the object began a very slow ascent, in the same pattern it had followed downward, straight up, gradually. Eventually it ascended from our sight. I think everyone on our street made phone calls trying to find out what it was. Dad called the airport and they said it was a weather balloon. But it wasn't a weather balloon. I'm now 45 years old and I have never forgotten this experience. I'm a lifelong community journalist and have seen a lot of things, but I have never seen anything to match this. I wish I could find someone in the old neighborhood who remembers it.
Occurred, the 20th of August 1966, 1 hour 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: orb. Duration: 25 minutes. No of observers. 4 red light in tree in August 1966. I was a 17-year-old high school girl. Me, my younger sister and mother and father had gotten up early on this August day, 1 a.m., to pack up our car to start a weeks-long vacation trip out west through 7 states. As we were packing up the trunk of our 1963 Chevy, something caught my eye in the yard next to ours. Back then the yard to the left of our house had a large apple tree growing in it. Now I never would have even glanced at the blackened yard or tree. But what caught my attention immediately was a small red orb just sitting there halfway up in the tree facing our driveway. The red light did not reflect on the leaves. It was a dull red color. Well, when I saw that light, the hairs went up on the back of neck and I was immediately spooked. And I think everyone knows when they are seeing something that is unnatural and shouldn't be there. And because I was a kid and my father was packing up the car with military precision, I didn't say anything about it while we were finishing up loading the car. As we were backing up the darkened driveway, I was so frightened I didn't look at the light, but I knew it was still there. After about 20 minutes of driving, we got out on the highway and I said to my mom, "Did you see that light in the tree?" She said, "Yeah, I saw that. What was it?" She added that maybe it was the light up on top of the telephone pole. Back then the poles had glass transformers on top, and when they had an overload they would turn red. Well, I thought maybe that was it and forgot about it. When we returned from our trip a week later, I looked at the tree and the spot where the light had been was just about 5 feet above my head. The transformer is about 20 feet away from the tree and 25 feet above it. So that could not have been the explanation. Since this happened, I have read that sometimes UFOs send down small red balls or orbs, and maybe they are observation things. It sure did look like it was watching us, and we interrupted whatever it was up to. And I know this light did not belong in that tree. I never saw anything like that ever again.
Occurred the 15th of September 1965, 15 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: egg. Duration: 20 seconds. Know of observers: 1. Characteristics: lights on object. Zigzagging egg. In daytime. It was early fall 1965, late afternoon, and we had just had some rain. The rain had stopped and dark gray clouds were scudding overhead. My parents went outside with my sister, and for some reason I was still in the house. As I was going through the dining room area to get to the back door, I passed a window looking toward the east. Something caught my eye in the sky over some trees. It appeared to be an egg-shaped object that was emitting its own brilliant light source. Not silver, but like an egg-shaped light bulb in the sky. It really stood out against those gray clouds. It was coming toward where I was watching it out the window, and it was really moving. At first, the movement of it really puzzled me because it was going back and forth, advancing toward me, until I realized that it was in a zigzag motion horizontally while flying. Then the object streaked out of the window space while making a sharp turn toward the west, where I lost sight of it. I burst out the back door and caught a very quick look at it as it went through the sky at an incredible speed through a break in the trees. This object crossed a large part of the sky in just a blink of an eye and made absolutely no sound. No plane or jet could do that back then or now and be lit up like this thing was. Of course, I just happened to be passing the window when I saw it, but since it made no sound, my family, who were outside at the time, missed it completely because there was no reason to look up.
Occurred the 1st of February 1965, 7 hours 30 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: circle. Duration: unsure. Know of observers: 1. 1965 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Planet-looking object was seen hovering over two-story home. No lights or sound. Approx. 1965 or 1967. I lived in the Indianapolis area of Indiana. I was in 1st or 2nd grade. I was walking to school one day when I saw an object above a house. It was above a two-story home and much larger than the home it was above. The object looked like a planet. It had two different colors, or at least darker and lighter areas, but no lights or windows. It made no sound at all. It just hovered above the home, didn't get higher or lower, and just rotated in a circle above the home. I was standing on the sidewalk in front of this home. So, I got a good look at this object. I remember looking at it for windows or lights. I watched it for a while, and then decided I should go home and tell somebody. When I got back with my parents, it was gone. They told me others had reported it also. I can't be exact on the year, but I think it was 1965. And it must have been winter, because when I got to school, I remember the teacher telling me I was late and hurry up and take my coat off. I remember the coat was a heavy winter coat. I also have no idea on how long I watched the object. I still wonder what it was after all of these years. I hope someone else saw this and knows.
Occurred the 15th of June 1963, 22 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: disc. Duration: 5 minutes. Know of observers: 5. Characteristics: lights on object. Low flying huge disc spotted in Indianapolis, Indiana, 1963, by a group outside at dark. A small group of neighborhood teenagers were outside in the early evening just talking and hanging out. All of us spotted a rotating object approaching low but with no sound. It stopped directly over us. It had green lights revolving around it, hovered, and then sped off. I was 17 years old, now retired and living in Colorado. This has bothered me for 56 years. One of the other people who saw it became my husband several years later, is an MD and very high up in the Air Force when he retired. We reported this to the Indianapolis airport and was told we probably saw nothing. This was definitely not a joke to us, scared us all pretty badly. I was an educator for 30 years, all of our group became professional people. From that day forward, I became a complete believer in UFOs as I witnessed one and will never forget it.
Occurred the 10th of September 1971, 19 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape: other. Duration: 5 minutes. Know of observers: 1. Crescent-shaped object seen in 1971. My sighting took place in early or mid-September 1971. I don't remember the exact date. I was taking an evening graduate-level chemistry class on the north side of Indianapolis. Class had finished and I was walking through the parking lot to my car. It was about sunset. The sky was clear. some bright, moving objects in the western sky caught my attention. I remember 3 objects. 2 of them were tracing out a more or less circular path about 180 degrees opposed to each other, as if they were orbiting around a common center and trying to stay as far apart as possible. The 3rd object was moving in its own oval path to the south of the first 2. As the objects moved, they would reflect the setting sun, then the reflection would fade and a dark shape could be seen. This is similar to how the sunlight plays off an airliner near sunset, and at first I thought the objects were planes in a holding pattern. However, something that's hard to put my finger on held my attention, something unfamiliar about the shape, or maybe the way the objects seemed to glide or float, different from the way a plane flies. They also didn't seem to bank as they turned. I could hear no sound or see any lights on the objects. As I continued to watch, the 3rd object, the one farthest to the south, started to move east, directly toward me. It passed almost directly overhead and continued east until it was lost in the dusk. As it passed overhead, I got a good look at it. The main part of the object was crescent-shaped and seemed to be made of a dull finished material. It looked dull red as it was overhead. Projecting back from the center of the crescent was a sort of stubby rectangular fuselage that was highly reflective, like polished metal. This was the part that reflected the sun. There was no sign of a tail assembly of any kind or engines. There was no sound, contrails, or lights, nor could I see any windows. I remember the object seeming to be in the size range of an aspirin tablet to a dime held at arm's length. It's hard to estimate the object's altitude and true size. As I said, it was about sunset, but due to buildings and trees I couldn't tell if the sun had actually gone below the horizon. My first impression was that the sun was down, and the object was very high to catch its last rays, which meant it had to be huge. If the sun had still not set, the object could have been lower and smaller. As the object went out of sight, the first 2 objects were still circling in the west. I guess the whole observation lasted about 5 minutes. I don't know if anybody else in the parking lot saw the objects or not, and I was too fixed on observing to call anybody's attention to them. I never reported the incident, only told a few family members. While this is an old sighting, I thought it might be of interest.
Occurred the 1st of April 1972, 19 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, disk duration, 1 hour approx. No of observers. 0 characteristics. Lights on object, aircraft nearby. Indianapolis. Multicolored round object 1972-74 chased by fighter jets approximately 1972-74 West Central Indianapolis, Indiana. I was a young boy, probably around 7 years old. I was walking back home with my friend coming from his house on a dead-end street, Corral and Bertha Street. When we reached the front of my house and sidewalk, we noticed a huge round object hovering directly over us. No sound. I cannot explain how huge this was. We had to actually move our heads back and forth to see the entire object at one point. It was rotating with multiple colored lights. From our vantage point directly under it, it seemed to be like a spoke in a wheel. The outer edges seemed to be rotating around the center and changing colors as it did that. Suddenly, the object shot straight up in a flash. Hardly even able to distinguish between it and stars other than the color looked more orange from the distance view. We ran inside to tell my mother, and finally we convinced her to come outside to see it. By that time, other neighbors was outside too looking at it. The object had came back down to its original position, but occasionally would maneuver up, down or left or right, and even diagonally. Sometimes fast and sometimes slow. The second time it shot up and was hardly distinguishable between the stars other than the color difference. We all went back inside and my mother called the police and reported it. She also called the Air Force. Moments later it was on the news on TV. Weir Cook Airport at the time, now Indianapolis International, had sent 2 fighter jets to intercept it. We went back outside a third time and seen the jets heading towards the object. Suddenly the object shot straight upwards again so fast, but this time it disappeared completely out of view. The news that evening said the Air Force identified it as being a blown off-course weather balloon. The next day it was in the newspapers also. A few days later, me and my friend was walking alongside the road in the middle of the day, and a blue car and two men in Air Force uniforms stopped us and asked if we saw anything strange in the sky. We told them about it as they took notes. Then they drove away. I never heard anything more about this. Now I am 46 and still remember it so vividly. I tried researching the news archives without success. If anyone else who witnessed this, please post here. Obviously, it was not a blown off-course weather balloon. We do not chase weather balloons with fighter jets. I might add, they couldn't catch it. Lol, I just wish I could find some archives or documentation on this. Approximately 1972 to 75 summertime, at night, very clear sky. It was all over the news. Why can't I find anything on it now?
Occurred, the 1st of January 1981, hour 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, light duration, 7 minutes. No of observers. 1 characteristics. Emitted beams, very bright green light without sound, moved over me and my car from a wooded area about a 1000 featuring up. I had just left my brother's house on New Year's Eve late that night. The new year had been in only about an hour. As I got about a mile away from my brother's home, I noticed this very bright light in the distance, coming out of the sky and going down to the ground. I didn't pay it any attention until I got closer to the source, about 2 more miles towards home. As I came up on this main street, this bright light came out of the sky again, and I thought it was a police helicopter on some kind of patrol. But then, I noticed, there was no noise coming from the light at all. And the light was green, and it was glowing on me, my whole car, and around the area I and my car was in, about a 20 feet area. I looked at my car, and it was green inside and out, and freen all over me. It was so strange because no one else won on the mostly busy road but me. The quite bright green light withdrew back up in the air to the source, and then vanished. One of the strange things of it was there was a great silence during the whole thing. No noise of any motor, just silent. Later in that week, I noticed others on the TV news across the nation noticed the very same thing as I did. The bright light with a green glow that was too bright to look at. I didn't tell my wife about it till about a month later.
Occurred, the 1st of June 1982, 20 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, en route to Lima, in USA. Shape, circle duration, no of observers. 3 characteristics. Lights on object, 1980s circular UFO seen while driving. This happened back in the early 80s. 81 to 82-ish. My grandfather, uncle and I were driving back to Lima, Ohio from a stamp and coin show in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was already dark out. Not sure of the season, but I don't recall it being winter. We were on the highway. I believe it's Highway 70, and I was sleeping in the back seat of the car. I was awakened by the sound of my grandfather and uncle taking about something they were looking at. I leaned forward over the front seat and saw a large circular object in the sky. It had white lights on the bottom and red lights on its sides. It might have been red on bottom and white on the sides. It was long ago. You could tell by the movement of the lights that the object was spinning. My grandfather tried to tell me it was a small plane pulling a lit-up banner, but even at 11 to 12 years old I knew what we were seeing. I had a chance to talk to my uncle about this even earlier this year at a reunion, and he said, "I don't know what that was, but it was not a plane pulling a banner. We told you that so you wouldn't be frightened."
Occurred, the 18th of December 1975, 0 hours 30 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Claremont, in USA. Shape, disk duration, 10 minutes. No of observers. 2 characteristics. Lights on object, emitted beams, disc-shaped saucer over house with a laser light focused on home. I was driving on St. Road 136 towards the town of Claremont, Indiana, when I saw 3 white lights low in the sky. As the airport is 15 miles. So, I didn't think too much of it at first, other than the lights were too low for an aircraft on approach as well. They didn't seem to be moving towards me, but me towards them. As I drove nearer the lights, I stopped, and what I saw nearly took my breath away, permanently. Suspended about 25 feet above a home, was a saucer. There were 3 cones, coming from the sides of the saucer, one in the middle and 2 others at 45-degree angles from the middle one. At the tips of these cones were the white lights I'd been watching. On the underside of the cones were 3 colors: blue, red, green. None of the lights were flashing, and there were no windows. What terrified me most was that from the underside center of the saucer was the most incredible laser of white light, about 4 inches wide, focused on the roof of the house below. I rolled down my window and sat to wait for another car to come to confirm for me I wasn't crazy. I even pinched myself hard, thinking I might be dreaming. There was no sound at all coming from the saucer. In 1975, Claremont was still a 1-stoplight town on the outskirts of Indianapolis. The saucer was just south of the Dairy Queen by about 3 or 4 houses. After waiting 10 minutes for another car to come, I got scared and drove to the sheriff's station 2 blocks away, but no one was there. At the time, it was a 3-man operation. I was so freaked out I drove around for half an hour before heading home. The next night I was at a small gathering and hesitantly mentioned seeing a UFO when another friend said, "I saw it too." I told him, "Okay, you go in another room and draw a picture of it and then we'll compare." And by God, he had the same picture with the cones and all. He said he saw it around 23:30 flying towards downtown Indianapolis at a high rate of speed, accompanied by 2 other saucers. They flew directly east until they got to Merritt. Ean Street divides the city E-W and goes N-S, whereby they took a 90-degree turn and sped down the center of the city. Hundreds if not thousands of people must have seen these saucers, yet there was no mention of it in any media. I believe the December 20th 75 sighting on your website is the same as mine. All I can remember is that it was likely a tour or fry night, and it was the week leading up to Christians. Of all the reports I've read, none have ever mentioned anything about a laser focused on a house, anything, and I've always wondered these last 35 years what that white laser could see for them. Oh, and the saucer was of a soft luster like I've never seen, like an egg painted a semi-matte silver.
Occurred the 20th of December 1975, 22 hours 30 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: IN, USA. Shape, disk duration: 15 minutes. No of observers. 3 characteristics: lights on object. We saw a saucer-shaped vehicle at night in Indiana in the winter of 1975. At first, it was just a light in the distance that moved erratically. Sometimes it would stay in one spot, sometimes it would move quickly, more quickly than a helicopter or an airplane. Sometimes lights would flicker. We had to stop at a gas station to fill up, and we didn't even talk about this vehicle that we were following. When we got back on the road, my cousin's wife was driving. She spotted it, and it was closer because it was brighter. This time it crossed over to the passenger side of the highway and stayed in one spot. When we approached it, I rolled down the window. My cousin and I stuck our heads out the window, and we saw it about a stone's throw off the highway, about the height of a water tower. There were windows around it, with what appeared to be lights on top, although they weren't lit. Right after we passed it, it took off with no sound and at an extremely high rate of speed.
Occurred the 3rd of December 1976, 23 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location: Monrovia, IN, USA. Shape, triangle. Duration: 20 minutes. No of observers. 2 characteristics: lights on object, emitted beams after being followed by a UFO. A beam of light shone down on my sister. This story is not my own but belongs to my sister. I have wanted her to relate this story for a long time, but she does not have access to the net. In the winter of '76, her and her girlfriend were coming home from a meeting and were driving on a lonely country road when her friend said, "Look at that helicopter." My sister said, "That is no helicopter," and she asked her friend to stop the car. Her friend freaked out and floored the gas pedal. The bright triangle object followed them to my sister's lonely farmhouse and was over the barn when they pulled into the drive. My sister got out of the car and the object slowly moved above her. It did not make a sound. Her friend was hysterical and began to yell for my sister's boyfriend to come outside. The object was directly over my sister, and she looked up and saw a triangle shape at treetop level. A beam of light shone down on her and she looked down because she was afraid it would hurt her eyes. At her feet was a cat, and the beam broke and also shone on the cat. By this time her boyfriend was at the door, and when he slammed the screen door the light went out. The object moved off through the cornfields, and when it was far away a bunch of lights that were thought, at the time, to be stars fell to link up to it. I know this sounds crazy, but she cannot tell this without tears in her eyes and getting all shaky. We knew nothing about abductions at the time, so we know of no missing time.
Occurred, the 1st of June 1979, 23 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Marion, IN, USA. Shape, triangle. Duration, 1 hour. Know of observers, 7 characteristics, aura or haze around object. Spaceship in a dream. I was between 10 and 13 years old when I had this dream about a triangle spaceship. It started at this graveyard I have never been to or seen before. I found myself sneaking through the graveyard not knowing why, but just kept going. Then I seen a few other people doing the same as me, just going forward not knowing why. Then I noticed we were all heading towards a pond, up by the water's edge is where we all went. It was weird. I remember we were not speaking to each other, but I was not scared. Then all of a sudden a man in white was standing above the water and started talking to us. He said he brought us all here to tell us we were using nuke power the wrong way. He said we would change that someday, and we all got a book. Then he called me up there with him. I stood beside him, and then this bright light came up out of the water beside him. It was like a big triangle. Then it was over.
Occurred, the 16th of August 1975, 21 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, triangle. Duration, 2 minutes. Know of observers, 2 characteristics, lights on object. Triangular object, got within 200 feet, stopped in mid-air, took off like a rocket and disappeared, never made any noise. Seen but did not hear it approaching from about half a mile away. It proceeded to get within 200 feet at about 75 feet off the ground with no noise. What severity was triangular in shape, dark gray or black in color, with a light on each of its 3 tips. It was probably only going 20 miles per hour. Once it got as close it was going to get, it stopped and just hung there in mid-air and no noise was present. It stayed there for about 20 seconds or so, then with no noise it proceeded to go in a straight line, probably at a 45-degree angle towards the horizon, due south. And without slowing down, it shot out at a 90-degree angle at a super fast rate of speed and just plain disappeared. Noise while this was going on. Me and my buddy were at the end of our street playing when we seen this sighting. We were 14 years old at the time.
Occurred, the 23rd of December 1978, 22 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, disk. Duration, 2 minutes. Know of observers, 1 characteristics, lights on object. 2 disc-shaped craft hovering over city. Night, forms defined by red, successive lights illuminating edges, suddenly shoot skyward as I was driving west on 30th Street, Indianapolis. West side, I turned off the major 2-lane thoroughfare onto a winding residential street. I glances up and saw red blinking lights lighting in succession, with the 2 circular, disc-shaped crafts being defined by the red lights. I stopped the car and pulled to the curb to try to make sense of the phenomenon, when both crafts, hovering together at about 500 to 800 feet, suddenly went vertical, maybe somewhat angled away, and quickly disappeared into the night sky. I heard no sounds.
Occurred, the 15th of July 1972, 17 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, cigar. Duration, 30 seconds. Know of observers, 1 characteristics, changed color. I was 6 years old. Was playing outside. Saw a round object colored red and moon yellow to the north. I was frightened, ran inside screaming. The object was similar in size to the moon. It appeared rather suddenly. When my dad came out to look at what I was screaming about, it was gone. The day was hot and hazy. I remember the object was hovering over the Bride, which if it's the 16 HT Street Bridge it would have been due north. I was at a friend's house at the time. As far as I can remember, I was the only witness to this. I have never reported this. I saw a special on A&E on UFOs, and there was a drawing of a UFO identical to the one I saw. Note on information. Contacting me could result in problems with work or my husband. Please email me if you wish me to contact you so I can do so when it would not cause a problem.
Occurred, the 19th of February 1974, 3 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Shape, disk duration, 5 seconds. No of observers. One rapid-moving high-altitude glowing orange disk moves from horizon to horizon in about 5 seconds. I looked up on a clear, cold, starry night while on the driveway preparing to get in my car. I saw a glowing bright orange circular object which I assume was a disk as I was looking at the circular bottom. The object appeared to be as high up as typical airplane altitudes, but I was unable to judge the size of the object. It made no sound and left no trail. The object came from the western horizon and disappeared into the eastern horizon in about 5 seconds.